Rachel Maddow Show, weeknights at 9 Eastern on MSNBC.
I'm Tremaine Lee, host of Into America, a podcast from MSNBC. Join me as we go into the roots of inequality.
It's an economic injustice and a racial injustice. And then when you add health, it's a health injustice.
Into what's at stake.
People are going to be voting not for a person, but for stability.
And into what comes next. Into America, a podcast about who we are as Americans and who we want to become. New episodes every Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday. Subscribe now. Hey everyone, it's Tremaine Lee, MSNBC correspondent and host of the podcast Into America. It's hard to believe, but even as COVID-19 continues to spread, the school year is right around the corner. And 17 of the 20 largest school districts are choosing to go fully remote as their back-to-school plan. That affects more than 4 million students. The San Diego Unified School District is one of them. So that's where we're spending this week on Into America, with a 3-part series we're calling Coronavirus in the Classroom. A working mom opens up about her frustration that her son can't return to his elementary school in person. A teacher in a low-income school shares what remote learning has exposed about the digital divide. And Dr. Linda Darling-Hammond, president of California State Board of Education, talks about the tough decisions that were made this spring and why she believes districts like San Diego are ready for online learning this fall. I hope you'll join us for these conversations. New episodes drop every Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday. Search for Into America wherever you're listening right now and subscribe.
Hi, everyone. It's Joy Reid. I'm so excited to tell you about my new MSNBC show, The Readout. Every weeknight, I'm talking with the biggest newsmakers about the most pressing issues of our time, like Joe Biden.
The words of president matter. And so as president of the United States, the first thing I'm going to do is stand up and talk sense and be honest with the American people, level with them.
Atlanta Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms.
We need as many voices as we can have as possible, sounding the alarm, encouraging people to wear masks and to take all precautions and to follow the science and the data.
Senator Kamala Harris.
We send folks into war wearing camouflage. So what is going on here? When you send camouflage uniformed officers into a city,
and many more. You can listen to The Readout as a podcast by searching for The Readout, that's REIDOUT, one word, wherever you're listening right now, and subscribing for free. Thanks for listening.
Rachel Maddow Show, weeknights at 9 Eastern on MSNBC.